الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. We continue tonight inshallah with the Masail of Itikaaf to finish the chapter. And just before that we mentioned one or two things from yesterday's dars. We mentioned the manner of counting the night of laylatul qadr backwards and the second opinion in that regard. So sometimes you see in certain Arab countries, in some masajid, they do not perform Taraweeh throughout the month of Ramadan, but they start on night 20. And that has a link and a connection to the second opinion of how to count Laylatul Qadr, which means that if then the month of Ramadan is 29 nights, if you count backwards, night 29, 28, 27, night 20 would be the first of the 10 nights. So that's why they would start at Qiyamul Layl on night 20. The general trend is that the first of the last 10 nights is night 21. So that's just something, it's something connected to that. Then we mentioned for Itikaaf, we mentioned that Itikaaf, you need to enter into a masjid and you need to intend spending a short, at least a short period of time in the masjid. So you need two things for Itikaaf. You need the intention and you need to be in the masjid for an act of worship. And we spoke on the two opinions regarding an intention. Do you need a specific one or not? Or just the fact that you are going to do an ibadah, that will count already. So based on that, if a person goes into the masjid, he's going to spend some time there, for example, to do something else like repair something in the mosque or any other reason that's not ibadah, then that person would not get the reward of i'tikaf. So two things are connected to i'tikaf. And we said, however, even if he spends a few moments in the mosque, it will count. But some ulama, because they stipulate that you must spend a day and a night, in i'tikaf, because of that, some of the ulama mention, just like with fasting, where they say it's mustahab to fast while doing i'tikaf. Why? Because of the other opinion of the ulama, the Malikiyya and the Hanafiya, about i'tikaf not being valid without fasting. The Hanbali and Shaafi'ee madahib would say that it is sunnah, it is mustahab, or it is preferable to fast. And we spoke about the mas'ala of having an opinion of mustahab or makruh because of the difference of opinion of some ulama saying wajib or haram. So this is to go out of the difference of opinion. So the same thing would apply here. And then we mentioned the nadhr, and that it's makruh to perform a nadhr from the outset. And we mentioned why and its connection to a stingy person. So just connected to that, some of the ulama have another opinion, and they say the nadhr divides into two categories. We are speaking of a nadhr for an act of worship, because nadhr itself divides into 5 to 7 categories. But the nadhr for an act of worship, like to fast or to give charity or whatever it may be, these ulama divide it into 2 categories. Number one, they say if a person takes a vow or takes an oath or makes a vow without connecting it to a benefit for himself, then this is not makruh. And if there's a benefit for himself, then it becomes makruh. And that would be they divide this into 2 types. So that means a benefit for a person is, oh Allah, I will fast 30 days if you cure me, or if I pass the exam. So this stipulation would make it makruh. But if you just said, oh Allah, I make a vow, or I'm going to give $100 in charity or fast so many days, then this would not be makruh. And that would more link to the virtue that why somebody who fulfills his vow is one of the reasons he gets to Jannah. Yufuna bin nadhr. Allah says about the people of Jannah, that one of the things they did was they fulfilled the vows. Now we said that fulfilling the vow after you make the vow, according to those who say a vow in general is makruh, which is an opinion of many of the ulama. And this other group divided into like this, which is actually quite a sound opinion or a decent opinion to go through based on the evidence that are there. Amongst the ulama who have this opinion is Sheikh Amin al-Shanqiti, rahmatullahi alayh. And then we said that i'tikaf is sunnah mu'akkada. We said it's sunnah mu'akkada. We said it is sunnah at all times, and Ramadan it's more emphasized, and in the last 10 it's the most emphasized. And we spoke on Ibn Abin from the Hanafi, from the Hanafi school who mentioned a good usul mas'ala on why it became sunnah mu'akkada and not wajib. Another way to look at it, that it became sunnah mu'akkada, is the fact that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Man arada an ya'takif falya'takif al-ashr." Whoever wants to perform i'tikaf, let him perform i'tikaf in the last 10 days of Ramadan. In the last 10 days of Ramadan. So here the ulama say, and this is important to know when we read a hadith, and this thing I'm going to mention comes in a hadith, we know from there that the action mentioned in the hadith is not going to be wajib, it's got to be mustahab, it can't be more than that. And that is, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, "Man arada," whoever wants to perform i'tikaf, whoever wishes to perform i'tikaf, then he should perform i'tikaf in the last 10 days. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam linked the action to a person's own choice, to a person's own choice. So once that is done, then the rule goes lower from wajib to mustahab or sunnah. So that's another angle to look at it from. And then they say, okay, then we're going to continue from where we left off. We mentioned the mas'ala of having iddah, the mas'ala of having i'tikaf. We mentioned the mas'ala of having i'tikaf in the house, and we spoke of it for a lady. We did include a man and different things connected to it, and the musalla, etc. But those who say it should be in a mosque, one of the reasons, some ulama mentioned that Allah says, وَأَنْتُمْ عَاكِفُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ. The evidence is that Allah says, while you are performing i'tikaf in the masjid. So it's actually linked to having intercourse with the spouse. Allah says that you cannot do it, you should not do it while you are performing i'tikaf, but Allah says in the masjid. So specifying in the masjid. So now these ulama say that had the masjid not been something that's an objective, Allah would have said, وَأَنْتُمْ عَاكِفُونَ, and do not have sexual relations with your wives while you are performing i'tikaf. And that's it. He wouldn't have said while you are performing i'tikaf in the masjid. So that's a good perspective to look at it from as well. But in usul, there's a mas'ala of the mafhum, the meaning, the opposite meaning of a text. Do we apply it? Do we apply it or not? And how do we apply it? That means that if I say don't stand, if I say don't stand, does that mean you must sit? Does that mean you must sit? So that would apply in many times, in many types of ways. So the Hanafi madhab, in many types of opposite meanings of texts, they do not apply it. Now I explained it very vaguely, unfortunately. Those who understand the mas'ala, they know it's a mas'ala of a mafhum mukhalafa and mafhum muwafaqa. And that's a bit of a technical mas'ala. To explain that's going to take a few minutes. So inshallah, and at another time we'll mention it. Or if somebody is interested in knowing it, then we can mention it with proper examples and in a bit of detail just now or later on at the end of the dars or something, inshallah. But just for those who know this mas'ala of mafahim, then this mafhum of makan, then they would say it's not a dalil. They would say it's not a dalil for mafhum of makan. You have mafhum that is zaman and makan, this one here is makan. So they would say no. They would say you don't apply it here. And then the ulama speak about a masjid, and they describe what is a masjid and what is deemed a masjid. Here I said we'll delay this mas'ala to when we speak at the end of all these chapters of fasting. We'll speak on the masail connected to the masjid. And that's because there's a few masail connected to it, and there's a few details and difference of opinions and things like that. So we can touch on all of that, inshallah. So then they say, وَمَنْ نَذَرَ أَيَّ الِاعْتِكَافَ وَالصَّلَاةِ فِي مَسْجِدٍ غَيْرِ الْمَسَاجِدِ الثَّلَاثَةِ وَأَفْضَلُهَا الْمَسْجِدِ الْحَرَامِ فَمَسْجِدُ الْمَدِينَةِ فَالْأَقْصَى. Then they say that a person who takes an oath to perform salah or i'tikaf in Masjid al-Haram or Masjid al-Nabawi or Masjid al-Aqsa, then they say for this kind of a person who specifies one of these three masajid, then they say the best masjid of these three is Masjid al-Haram, then they say Masjid al-Nabawi, and then they say Masjid al-Aqsa. So they say that if somebody takes an oath to perform salah or i'tikaf in one of these three masajid, then if they specified i'tikaf in one of a lower rank like Masjid al-Aqsa or Masjid al-Nabawi, then if they perform that salah or i'tikaf in one of those three masajid that are higher in rank. So if you took an oath for Masjid al-Aqsa and then you spent i'tikaf or salah, instead of Aqsa, you did it in Masjid al-Nabawi or Masjid al-Haram, then it would count. But if you took an oath to perform salah or i'tikaf in Masjid al-Nabawi or Masjid al-Haram, then you cannot do it in the lower one. You cannot do it in the lower one, which means if you took an oath in Masjid al-Haram, you cannot do it in Masjid al-Nabawi or Masjid al-Aqsa. But if you took it in Masjid al-Nabawi, then you're allowed to do it in Masjid al-Haram, but not in Aqsa. And if you took it in Aqsa, then you're allowed to do it in Aqsa or Masjid al-Nabawi or Masjid al-Haram. So they say generally if a person takes an oath on something, if that thing has a higher rank, you can do the higher thing, but you cannot do the lower thing. And this is an example of it. But they say if a person took an oath to perform salah or i'tikaf in a masjid where salatul Jumu'ah takes place, then in that case a person cannot perform i'tikaf in a masjid where salah takes place but not Jumu'ah. And then they speak about when is the time to enter the place of i'tikaf. So they say if a person, here we're going to speak of the nadhr, and we're going to speak, and it will apply as well to the sunnah or the nafl i'tikaf. The nafl i'tikaf, the sunnah, let's call it sunnah i'tikaf, that would be specifically, let's say, in the last 10 days of Ramadan. So they say if a person is going to spend a night in i'tikaf, then the time to enter is before Maghrib. Any time before Maghrib would count. And then he comes out after sunrise. So that's how he do it. To the extent where the fuqaha say that, the Hanbali fuqaha, they say that if a person spends i'tikaf in the last 10 days of Ramadan, it's mustahab for him to spend the night of Eid also in i'tikaf. Then he comes out the next morning before Salatul Fajr in his attire that he's in, his clothes that he's wearing for i'tikaf. And they say it's more virtuous because it's what many of the Salaf did. Ibrahim al-Nakha'i and others report this, and they say it's connecting two ibadah together. So that's what they mention for this aspect of spending the night of Eid in i'tikaf as well. Then they say if a person took an oath to spend a specific amount of days, if the person said, I'm going to spend 10 days in i'tikaf. Now when it comes to oaths and vows, most of the time it has to do with your intention. So here if a person said, I vow to spend 10 days in i'tikaf, in his head he just wants to spend 10 days. So he can do it 10 days together, he can do them separately, however he likes, 3 separately, 2 separately, and then 5, 10 separately, 9, and then 1, however he wishes. But if he specifies a specific time, then he has to fulfill that time. So he says from the 10th to the 15th of Rajab, for example, he has to fulfill that time, and obviously day after day, because that's how he took the vow. And if he then does not do it, if he then breaks the i'tikaf or he sets i'tikaf at another time, then there's kafara. And in saying that, we're going to mention some differences between a sunnah / a nafl i'tikaf or a waajib i'tikaf. So there's a few. We'll mention 3. The first one is that a nafl, or let's call it sunnah, the rules are the same. A sunnah i'tikaf, a person is allowed to break the i'tikaf. He can break it at any time. And for a nadhr, a waajib i'tikaf, a person it's wajib on him to fulfill the i'tikaf. It's wajib upon him. If he took an oath to perform i'tikaf from the 10th of Rajab to the 15th, he has to spend the whole time. If it's a nafl i'tikaf, he can break it. He can leave it any time. Then if a person breaks a nafl i'tikaf, then it's okay. The sunnah i'tikaf, nafl i'tikaf, this is excluding the Hanafi madhab. We're going to touch on the Hanafi just now. Then if a person broke his sunnah or his nafl i'tikaf, then there's nothing. He doesn't have to do qadr, there's nothing like that. But a vow, if he broke his vow i'tikaf, then here he has one of 2 choices. Either he gives kafara and he continues sitting for whatever's left of the vow. So if he said 10 to 15th of Rajab, then he broke it in one of the manners we're going to mention just now, on the 12th of Rajab or 13th, then he has to give kafara, and then he finishes the remainder of his vow, the last day or 2 in i'tikaf. Or the person can restart. But when does this apply to him? It applies to him when he hasn't specified a time. So if he said, I'm going to sit 10 days in i'tikaf, and then he broke it after 3 days, because he hasn't specified a time of when this should happen, then he can just restart it. And that will count. And then the last difference between i'tikaf that is sunnah and i'tikaf that is wajib is the mas'ala of shart. Shart means a stipulation. So a stipulation means, what does that mean? We're going to touch on it details just now, a bit of details to make it clearer. And that is if a person says, oh Allah, I take an oath or I make a vow to perform 5 days of i'tikaf. Then here, a person now has made this wajib on himself, not from the sharia. Allah has not this person on himself. So he has a bit of control over this action that he's made obligatory on himself. So he can stipulate. He can say, oh Allah, I make a vow to spend 5 days in i'tikaf, but I make an exception that I will go out for janazah salah, or I will go out to visit a sick person, or I will go out if I get sick, or I will go out to eat at home, or I will go out to use the bathroom at home. Then what happens here? This means that at the time of the stipulation, a person is allowed to do it, and it will not affect his oath. So the oath, then we allow the stipulation so that his oath can be fulfilled. Now in a nafl i'tikaf, you don't need the oath, because you don't need the exception, because you can just leave. You can just leave. And then when you come back, then you the i'tikaf you just restart the i'tikaf. So what would happen is the reward would stop. The reward would stop when you leave for no reason. So that means when you leave for a reason, in the nafl or the sunnah i'tikaf, like you have a necessity to do, you need to go to the bathroom, you need to get yourself some food, you need to buy yourself some food, or you need to make yourself some food, or you take a bath or wudu, things like that. You left the mosque, so your reward will not stop. Your reward will not stop while you have left for a valid reason. If you've left for an invalid reason, then the reward would stop. The reward would stop, and then when you come back, the reward will restart. In the waajib i'tikaf, now you've left for a reason, or you've left for your stipulation, then the reward is there, or the reward might not be there if it's for not too valid a reason, but it would not break the vow. It would not break the vow. It would not break the vow. So that's 3 differences between a nafl i'tikaf and a vow i'tikaf. And it's important to know this, because when one reads in the books of fiqh, the nafl i'tikaf, the rules are much easier, because most of the time to leave or not to leave, it's not a big deal. It's nothing connected to it. But the nafl i'tikaf is where the issue comes, because many ahkam and rules are narrated to it. We said that if a person breaks his nafl i'tikaf, then he has to give the kafara, or he has to restart it. So now that has a kafara, but a nafl i'tikaf, there's no kafara for it. So then they say that a person in i'tikaf, he can leave his place of i'tikaf for when there's a genuine reason, like to bring food or to bring his drinks, when there's no one else to bring it for him, or if he needs to vomit, or he needs to use the bathroom to answer the call of nature, or he needs to perform wudu, or he needs to perform ghusl, or he needs to leave for salatul jumu'ah. And then when this happens, they say that some say it's preferable when a person leaves for salatul jumu'ah. That's why we said if he performs salat i'tikaf in a mosque where jumu'ah takes place, it's better for him, then he doesn't have to leave. But now when he has to leave, they say it's permissible. But some say he shouldn't leave too early. He shouldn't leave too early. So they keep him at his place of i'tikaf, and then he goes near the time of Salatul Jumu'ah. Others say it doesn't matter because he's going from one place to another place, that it's the other place is a place where i'tikaf can take place. So it's fine. And hence they speak on the mas'ala of, does he have to walk faster so he can get to the other place as soon as possible? So here some say yes and others say no. Again, this is all connected more so to the vow, and more so these rules would connect to the sunnah i'tikaf according to the Hanafi madhab, the sunnah muakkad i'tikaf that takes place in the last 10 days of Ramadan. These rules apply there as well, that a person is only allowed to leave when there's a reason like bringing food or drink when there's no one else to bring it for him, or to use the bathroom, or to take a bath, or Jumu'ah. And then also the mas'ala of rushing for Jumu'ah, or going too early, or even staying too long afterwards at the place of Salah. Is he allowed to do that or not? Here the ulama, again, some allow it. They say it's fine because he's at a place where i'tikaf is valid, and others say he should try and go back as soon as possible. And then they say if a person's place of i'tikaf it gets destroyed for some reason, then his i'tikaf does not break. His i'tikaf does not break, and he can just go to another mosque. He can go to another mosque. And they also say if a person forgetfully leaves the mosque, and when he remembers, he comes back immediately, i'tikaf does not break. I'tikaf does not break. And then they say if a person needs to eat at home, then some ulama say that's not a valid enough reason to leave the i'tikaf and go eat at home. And others say it is a valid enough reason. Sometimes a person is maybe shy of the food he wants to eat, or he doesn't like to be seen by people that he's not used to eating. He's not used to. eating, he's not used to these people seeing him eat, they're strangers, then in that case, he can go to his house to eat. And they say a lady in haidh, or nifaas, if she's in iddah, if she's in Itikaaf, then she has to leave the mosque. She has to leave the mosque, and then again, if she's in haidh or nifaas, or iddah comes upon her, or she has to set iddah, in this case she leaves the mosque. In this case she leaves the mosque, and then when one of those three things are over, then she goes back. So here as well, the lady in haidh, does she lose the reward? She doesn't lose the reward, because of what we said yesterday. In many rules, a lady in haidh is connected to a sick person, and the sick person continuously gets the reward of something he would have done had he been healthy. So this lady would continuously get the reward of i'tikaf, and then when it is over, she comes back to complete the i'tikaf, if it's a nadhr, and if the time is left. And if it's a nafl i'tikaf, then it doesn't matter. She can just leave, and that's it, it's over, and she gets the reward, inshallah. Now, the ulama say that when you go out, when you go out for a need, here you can, for example, ask about a sick person. You can maybe make a purchase quickly here or there, but without taking too much time. So you ask, how is so and so who's a sick person, but you don't ask too many details and waste too much of time. Same thing is, you buy something, you do it as soon as possible, you make the exchange, the transaction, and you go back. So now in something like this, a person needs to, for example, to smoke. Now we're not touching the ruling on smoking, but some people are addicted. So then are they allowed to just leave the mosque to go and smoke? The answer would be absolutely not. Absolutely not. Can they smoke in the mosque? That absolutely not. But in a case where they have to go out for a reason, then they could maybe smoke then. With it not most likely not being permissible, but we're just mentioning the fiqh ruling. If somebody were to do it, then while he's answering the call of nature, he then tries to smoke. Not afterwards, because then he's going to delay coming back. So if a person needs to go out for a reason, he should not delay going back. If he delays going back, his i'tikaf breaks. Now again, that's for nadhr according to the other schools, and sunnah mu'akkada i'tikaf for the Hanafi madhab. So therefore, if a person needs to take the Hanafi madhab, they say if a person needs to take an obligatory ghusl, he can leave, or a ghusl for Jumu'ah, then he's allowed to leave. Other than that, he's not allowed to leave. But if a person needs to, then when he goes to answer the call of nature, or he goes to perform a wudu, then while that's a reason to leave the mosque, then as quick as possible, he can maybe rinse his body, and that would count. So that's how they look at it, like that. So as we say, they say you're not allowed to visit a sick person or to attend a janazah if you are in i'tikaf, unless you've made a stipulation. And your stipulation can be for a good deed, and it can also be for a reason where there's no specific reason attached to it. So you go out at home, you're going to say, I'm going to eat lunch every day at home. So they allow something like that. But they don't allow a person to make an exception for certain things. Like what? They say he's not allowed to make a stipulation that he can leave i'tikaf for no reason. Or he can leave to go and trade, because to trade and transact goes against the objective of i'tikaf. And then this thing of a stipulation, it does not apply to the sunnah mu'akkada i'tikaf in the Hanafi madhab. In the Hanafi madhab, stipulation can be made, but only for the nadhr i'tikaf, the waajib i'tikaf. Then the Hanafi madhab says that if i'tikaf breaks for any reason, we're speaking of the sunnah mu'akkada i'tikaf, right? If it breaks for any reason, like a person gets sick and he's now not able to fast, because they say you have to fast, or he has to leave the mosque, or haidh came to a lady, then in this case you have to do qadha of 1 day. That is for the day that you've broken the i'tikaf. They say you have to do qadha of 1 day, and while fasting. So if it happens to be in Ramadan, you can come back, because now what would happen is you can come back in if you had to leave, and then you'll be fasting and you would count. But what would happen is, if you're not fasting, or something would break your sunnah i'tikaf, then it would change to a nafl. So if a lady had to go out for haidh for 5 days and then came back and there's still a day or two of the last 10 days left, now she comes back, it will not be the sunnah mu'akkad, it will be a nafl i'tikaf. So then she's fasting, then it would fulfill the qadha she has to do of the day that broke for i'tikaf. The rest of the days, let's say it broke on day 4, then 6 days left or 5 days left, we know at the end of the month, they say it's not a must to do qadha, you can if you want. And the qadha day is the qadha is for the day that the i'tikaf broke. Um, and then if a person gets ill, he gets ill to the extent where he needs to leave the masjid, then the majority of the ulama, other than the Hanafi school, they say that this does not break the i'tikaf. It does not break the i'tikaf. So that means the nadhr would not break. The nadhr would not break if a person had to leave because of illness. In the Hanafi madhab, it would break. The i'tikaf would break, and therefore qadha has to be made of one day, that is the day that the person got ill and had to leave the mosque, and he has to do this while fasting. And then they say a person is not allowed to have sexual intercourse. So to have actual intercourse, and that would break the i'tikaf, and then kafara has to be given. Kafara has to be given for what? Not for the fact that intercourse happened, but for the fact that the i'tikaf, the waajib i'tikaf broke, because the waajib i'tikaf broke. And they say for a person to touch to touch his wife skin on skin without sexual desire, that's permissible. That's permissible. And if it is with sexual desire, then it shouldn't be done. But it does not break the i'tikaf, and there's no kafara or anything unless mani comes out. So if he ejaculates, then that would break the i'tikaf. It will break the i'tikaf, and he has to give a kafara, not for what he did, but for breaking the i'tikaf. So if a person leaves the place of i'tikaf for no reason, his i'tikaf breaks. And if he left for a reason, but then after completing his need, he spent too long outside, his i'tikaf breaks as well. If a person got drunk, he drank. If a person drank, his i'tikaf will not break. It will be sinful, but his i'tikaf will not break unless he got drunk. And if he got drunk, his i'tikaf breaks. And any major sin will not specifically break the i'tikaf. Depends on whether a person gets drunk or mani comes out. Mainly those are the main things that would break the i'tikaf. And then they allow for a person in i'tikaf to, for example, get married while he's in i'tikaf, or to witness a nikah taking place as a witness. They say those things don't affect. And then they speak on a person teaching while in i'tikaf. Can he let others recite the Qur'an to him, or he teaches ilm? Here the Hanbali madhab, the relied upon position is that a person does not do that. So generally, actions that benefit others are better than actions that a person does himself. That benefit himself. So actions that benefit others is more virtuous for a person to do than an action that just benefits himself. That's the general trend. Except now they make an exception for i'tikaf. They say because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam did not do so. They say he did not do so. And based on that, they say that for a person to have the non-wajib i'tikaf, they say for a person to teach or to recite, to correct others' recitation, things like that would be more virtuous than i'tikaf for a person. Because i'tikaf only benefits himself, and these other things benefit others. The second opinion in the Hanafi madhab is that if a person teaches while he's in i'tikaf, and he doesn't intend any showing off or any wrong intention, he just has the intention of worship and benefiting others, then this would be no problem in it. And then they say وَيُسْتَحَبْ اشْتِغَالُهُ بِالْقُرَبِ. So they say it's mustahab for a person to spend most of his time of i'tikaf in doing good actions like reciting the Qur'an and dhikr and things like that. And he should avoid things that do not have anything to do with him. They say a person should avoid these things. من حسن إسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعنيه. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, from the beauty of a person's iman is that those things that don't have anything to do with him, he doesn't put his nose in those things. So they say that's recommended throughout the time, but especially in times where a person is engaged in worship. When it's times for ibadah, like i'tikaf, or if a person went to the mosque to sit there, let's say on the day of Jumu'ah early, he does not engage his nose or his attention in these things that have nothing to do with him. And they say there's no problem for a person's wife to visit him while he's in i'tikaf, and for him to speak to her. But they say it's better that not too much time gets spent on these things, so that he can spend time on ibadah. And then if a portion of a person's body goes out of the mosque, then his i'tikaf does not break. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam used to take his head out of his place of i'tikaf, out of the mosque, and Aisha radiallahu anha used to comb his hair. She used to comb and oil his hair. And then they also say it's permissible for a person to speak to somebody who visits him, but they again recommend it doesn't happen, they don't spend too much time just chatting, because it goes against the objective of i'tikaf. Then the last couple of masail, they say here that if a person goes to the mosque, he should make the intention of i'tikaf. As we said yesterday, there's posters in many masajid that say you should say the words, I intend i'tikaf as long as I am in the mosque, and that's what they mention here. And we said the other opinion of many of the ulama, some of the later ulama, like Sheikh Taqiyuddin Ibn Taymiyyah rahmatullahi alayhi, he said you do not need to have a specific intention, just the intention of going to do a good deed in the mosque, that's enough for a person to also get the reward of i'tikaf. And then they say it's not permissible, they say it's not permissible to buy and sell for a person in i'tikaf. And because that is taking place in the mosque, and a transaction that takes place in the mosque would not be valid. A transaction that takes place in the mosque would not be valid. So that's what they say. And then connected to this is a mas'ala. In today's day and age, you can buy something online or through apps, basically on your phone while sitting in i'tikaf. What would the ruling on that be? Because the apparent way the fuqaha describe it, the Hanbali fuqaha, they say it's invalid. So that would indicate to this transaction being invalid. But the ulama say if a person buys while in i'tikaf, he purchases something he needs, like food or drink, because he needs those things, then this purchase would be valid. It would be valid. And what would strengthen this opinion is the fact that what happens here is both the buyer and the seller are not in the mosque. It's only the buyer. It's only the buyer who's in the mosque. Or if a person sells, if he has a need, like he's sitting in i'tikaf, there's no one else to support his family. We would say in this case, we said what? An action that benefits one person is virtuous, but an action that benefits others is more virtuous. So here, him not sitting in i'tikaf and going to work and earn is more virtuous for him than sitting in i'tikaf. But sometimes people do not grasp this and do not consider this. So let's say he is sitting in i'tikaf and then he sells, but online, then we'd say permissible. We'd say permissible, but we would not say in general permissible. We'd say when there's a need, and we'd also say it's better not to do it. Or we'd say, as what we said just now, that it would be out of a bit more piety to respect the sacredness of the mosque and the fact it's a place of worship. A person goes out, when he goes out of the mosque, then he makes the purchase quickly and comes back in. He makes the sale or the purchase quickly and he comes back in. So when he goes out to use the bathroom or wudu or a reason that he has, then he does this on his way out. And then the Hanafi and the Shaafi'ee schools of thought, they say that a contract that you do for nikah, or to take a wife back, which is also a contract called raj'ah, or to buy and sell in the mosque, if there's a need, it's permissible for a person in i'tikaf. For nikah, it's mustahab to have the nikah taking place in the mosque, but for a transaction, if there's a need, it's permissible. If there's a need, it's permissible. But to buy and sell in the mosque, out of trading and transactions where there's no need, then this would be makruh. So it would be valid, but it shouldn't be done. And the Hanafi madhab say that it's makruh tahrimi to make the transaction while bringing the thing you're going to buy or sell into the mosque. So to have this thing present in the mosque, that would be makruh tahrimi. So it's better that it be the sale takes place, but the exchange of whatever is being purchased is outside. So it's not like you sitting there and the buyer is in with his thing, like showing who wants to buy this, or the seller is sitting there and he's got his products in front of him in his i'tikaf, or if he's in the mosque in general, he's brought his products that he's going to sell with him. That he shouldn't do. So that's why that shouldn't be done. But when there's a need and things like that, then based on this opinion, it would be permissible. And based on this opinion of the Hanafi and Shafi'i madhab, it makes it easy to conclude the mas'ala of buying and selling online for a person in i'tikaf. When there's a need, then no problem. And for sure no problem, because they allow it when two people are present in the mosque, and this one person is only in the mosque. But on the Hanbali madhab, that's how you tackle that mas'ala. And then when it comes to clothing and perfume and things like that, then the Hanafi and the Hanbali madhab say that it's makruh for a person to put perfume while in i'tikaf. And this is an opinion that's only had in the Hanbali madhab. And they have two reasons for it. The one reason they give, I don't grasp it completely, so I'm not going to mention it. The second reason they give is they make an analogy on ihram. Now why they do this, I didn't find something clear in the 2 or 3 books that I checked, but that's just the reason they give. But the other opinion in the madhab, and according to the majority of the ulama, they say it's permissible to do so, and many times it's recommended in general to put perfume, especially when there's ibadah and things like that. It has a good scent, has an effect on the heart and things like that, so it would not be a problem to use perfume while in i'tikaf. And then the Hanbali madhab say that it's better, it's not makruh, but it's better for a person not to wear beautiful clothes or to enjoy certain things that are permissible for him before i'tikaf, like foods and things like that. He shouldn't just, enjoy these kind of luxuries or these kind of things, because i'tikaf is a time where you just focus on Allah and you just let go of the dunya. The Shafi'ee madhab say wearing beautiful clothes is not a problem. They say wearing beautiful clothes is not a problem. They say it's yajuz, they say it's permissible. And the ulama say that to remove hair or nails in the mosque is permissible. It's permissible to do so, as long as obviously none of the hair or the nails stay in the mosque and a person cleans up. They say the same thing with eating. You're allowed to eat in the mosque, but put a mat or something down so that any crumbs or anything that falls, it falls on the mat, and then you can clean it afterwards. But eating in the mosque is not an issue. And the Hanbali madhab, they recommend a couple of things with regards to how a person should sleep. And they say because you are in i'tikaf for ibadah and for Qur'an, you should try and sleep while you're cross-legged, as we said for laylatul qadr, and where the water of wudu is near you. When you get up, then you can perform wudu. Obviously, that's not applicable in today's day and age. There's a place for wudu in most masajid. But basically, you try and sleep when sleep overcomes you, and you try and sleep in a manner where you don't go into too deep a sleep, and that is cross-legged. And then, actually, tonight, we're going to finish early, inshallah. 2 masail left. Number 1, 2 interesting masail. They speak on what is the ruling of silence, for a person to just be silent. He just doesn't speak. So, the mashhur al-madhab say it's makruh for a person just to decide to go silent. For no reason, he's going to go silent. And they say that it's not an ibadah. A person should not think silence is an ibadah. They say it's makruh. So if a person thinks it's from piety not to speak, it's not the case. There's no ibadah like that. And Ibn Qudama and other scholars say that actually it's haram. They say the apparent wording of the ahadith is that just a person just to go into silence for no reason is haram. Ibn Taymiyyah, rahmatullahi alayhi, he says that actually the mas'ala of silence depends. Sometimes it can be haram, sometimes makruh, sometimes permissible, sometimes mustahab, and sometimes waajib. And that depends on the type of speech that one needs to engage in, or should engage in, or has the choice to engage in, or is recommended not to engage in, or he should definitely not engage in. So, for example, if a person needs to articulate something, or something wajib for his salah, or replying to salam, then it's wajib for him to speak. It will be haram for him to be silent here. And if it's, for example, people are backbiting, or the opportunity to backbite is there, here it will be haram for him to speak. It will be haram for him to speak. Yes, he should speak to tell others not to, but to backbite, haram. And if it's something that just, let's say, being inquisitive, something like that, that is not a sin, but here it would be better not to speak. So here, the silence here would be mustahab. And if it's just general discussion or things like that, then you cannot say it's makruh to be silent, or it's mustahab to be silent, or it's haram to be silent. So here a person has a choice. He can just speak. It's just general discussion. And then sometimes when it's something good to say, then it's mustahab. But it's not a must to say this, but it's something good, then it's mustahab to say it. So he says that would the rule be connected to silence. If a person were to ask what is the rule on being silent, or somebody said that, or somebody thinks it's out of piety to be silent, then you look at it like this. And the Hanbali madhab says that if a person takes an oath to be silent, then he does not fulfill this oath. He does not fulfill this oath because, as we said, that being silent is not an ibadah, and it doesn't have a basis in Islam to just be silent. Lastly, the mas'ala of, it's an interesting mas'ala, and that is speaking with the Qur'an. So what does that mean? That means that a person, something occurred, and instead of using normal speech, he quotes an ayah that implies that meaning. So let's say somebody knocks at the door. Instead of saying come in, he says udkhuluha bisalam, enter it peacefully or in peace.
Or he wants to eat something, so he says min baqliha wa qithaiha wa fumiha. So he wants specific things to eat, so he quotes the verse that mentions a few types of foods to eat. So this is what he does. Or somebody comes on time, at the appointed time, so he says jitta ala qadri ya Musa. Allah says about Musa alayhi salam, that you've come at the appointed time, O Musa. Or somebody just turned away without even looking back, he just went. So you say aqbil. You say, there's a few ayat that indicate this meaning, to this meaning. So things like that. Can you just do that? So the Hanbali madhab says that it's haram to use ayat in place of speech. They say it's haram to use ayat in place of speech. The second opinion in the madhab is that it is makruh to do so. So it's not haram. So they say because using the Qur'an as speech, it actually implies that the Qur'an is being used in something that is not being revealed for. So they say it's like taking a mushaf, a copy of the Qur'an, and putting it as a pillow. That's not why a mushaf is there. It's to recite, not to use as a pillow. So when you use it in something it's not supposed to be used for, then the rule will either be haram or makruh. And there's actually a hadith that's narrated to this effect. لا تناظر بكلام الله أو بكتاب الله. The meaning of this hadith, some of the fuqaha say it means to not use the Qur'an in place of speech. Do not use the Qur'an in place of speech. And but Shaykh Taqiyuddin says it's actually permissible. So if a person is called to a sin or something, so he says, so he uses an ayah that indicates that a person should not speak, should not go and perform the sin again. Or if something is bothering the person, he says, Ashku bathi wa huzni ila Allah. Like Allah quotes Ya'qub alayhi salam saying, I just implore Allah for my complaints and my difficulty. So a person says things like that. Ibn Taymiyyah says it at times it has scope for permissibility to do so. And lastly, there's actually an incident, I think it is Ibn Aqil, Ibn Aqil from the Hanabila. He says that there was a man called Abu Ishaq al-Kharraz, who used to, when it was Ramadan, he only used to speak, he left off all types of speaking, and he used to only use the Qur'an. So if his son came and knocked on the door, he'd say, Udkhuluha bisalam, enter it in peace. Or if he wanted to tell his son to get him cucumbers and certain types of food, he'd quote the verse that I quoted just now, Surah Al-Baqarah, min baqliha wa qithaiha wa qumiha. Is using this verse to indicate to him what he should buy. So this alim, Ibn Aqil, if I'm not mistaken, he said to him that this is not permissible. The Qur'an has not been revealed for worldly purposes. Rather, it has been revealed for explaining to the servants of Allah the rules of Allah, how to get close to